Okay, as people are starting to come in. As you start to come in and to zoom in, I should say, we'll give you a couple of minutes or maybe about a minute, and then we'll launch the program. So for those who have zoomed in already, thank you for coming in on time, and we appreciate your patience as others start gathering here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start. So welcome everybody to our Corporate Benefits Forum, it's virtual today. And we're really excited to be able to present this program because it is a pretty hot topic for a lot of our benefits executives. And it's called Effective Employee Engagement Strategies in a Post-Pandemic Workplace. And I know that all of you are so challenged by the disruption that has occurred in your workplaces and the changes that you've had to adapt to and to accommodate COVID safety and remote working and everything else. And I think what I've heard from many of you is that the challenge of engaging employees who are in a remote workplace and staying in a remote workplace, which I know many of employees are in different departments, certainly not all. I know that that's a double challenge for you to figure out how to engage those who are working remotely, and you have to continue to make a virtual world for them, whereas other worksite meetings that you might have for open enrollment or other just informational meetings that you have to explain benefits in person, may still be on the table for some, but certainly not all. Or maybe you have to adjust to the days that people are all in your workplace if you're on a hybrid model. So anyway, that's what today's topic is about, and we are just absolutely thrilled to have Lockton Dunning Benefits sponsor this program and bring to us two top-notch speakers who know exactly what they're talking about and know what you're facing as far as trying to engage employees in benefit strategies and the programs that you offer and the resources that you have available to them. So, but before we get, before I introduce our speakers, I'm going to go ahead and make a couple of comments that are really, really important. The first, of course, is Save the Date. December 2nd is our big annual benefits forum. We did virtually last year. We almost couldn't decide this year. This time we decided when everything seems to be, the vaccinations are so prevalent lately now, and that the availability of vaccines and the COVID safety protocols that we're able to put in place are really top notch. So we are going live for the first time in almost 2 years in person on December 2nd at the Irving Convention Center. It's a one-day program, starts in the morning about 8. We've got 8 incredibly important topics and sessions, and I'll be sending out an email tomorrow to all of you listing those topics in case you didn't look at them, but you can certainly look at our website and take a look. But most importantly, we really, really encourage you to register for this. I was talking with Michelle Brooks with Southwest Airlines, the benefits director of Southwest Airlines, and she's on our board of directors, and she suggested to me that during today's meeting that I tell you about and really emphasize what we're doing to keep the environment at the Irving Convention Center in our meeting space completely as possible, COVID safe and risk as low as possible. The precautions we're taking, for example, masks will be available. Anyone who wants to wear a mask is fine, welcome to do so. And we also are going to put spots on little colored codes. I saw that at a conference I was just at in Washington, D.C. last week, the National Coalition of Coalitions annual conference. Great turnout, by the way. They had red dots for those who really are taking great precautions, do not want to be too close, or keep your social distance. That's kind of the message there. Yellow dots say, well, we'll get close enough, we'll do a handshake, but not too much. And then the green spot will say, hey, I'm okay, I'm vaccinated, you're vaccinated, I feel safe, and I'll do a handshake or a hug, whatever. The other thing we're doing is seating. It's going to be a very large meeting room. We're going to have the round tables, but they were only putting 4 seats at a table instead of the usual 8 where they're all clustered around and kind of crowded in. So there'd be lots of space at each table, hand sanitizer everywhere. And the theater seating at the back of the room where we always put in the extra seats will be about 3 feet apart. That's what they did at the DC meeting I just got back from. And then we're serving boxed lunches so that you don't have to go through, the food line, pick up the plate that you like, and eat it where you feel comfortable eating it. So, and then of course we'll have the large room for our exhibitors. And I'm so pleased that so many of our sponsors have come out. We've got a terrific number of sponsors for this, supporting this program. And that's all the more reason we really need you there, and your benefits team members. Please, they're all complimentary. Please encourage your benefits assistants, whoever is doing different jobs in the benefits department, because the sessions are so valuable and important to you right now that I'm sure that they would pick up lots of insights and useful information that they can bring back and actually contribute to the success of your benefit strategy. So please, please, please register today and join us in person on December 2nd. That's the Thursday after Thanksgiving. Next slide, big reminder. We're in the middle of our membership renewal season, full swing. And we offered all of you a 25% discount on your dues for 2022. This past year, we comped your dues for all of our corporate members. We can't do that again this year. But we'll offer you a 25% discount. It ended yesterday. However, because you made the effort to come to today's meeting, and if you haven't renewed yet, we'll extend that 25% discount to you for the rest of this week. Please take advantage of it. It's highly valuable. So we want you to stay at the course, stay with us. We've got a good next year planning in full swing, and we need your participation, want your participation. So take advantage of that special deal, 25% off your dues. But to get it, you have to either call or email Diana, who is on the line here today, or tell her in chat box that you want to renew, and she'll make sure that you get the discount to whatever the invoice said that you owed for 2022. Okay, let's start the program. So I'm very pleased to introduce our 2 speakers, Eric Halverson and Kimberly Roberts. Let me introduce Eric first because he's going to kick off the program. He is the Vice President at Lockton Dunning Benefits. This might be kind of small print for you all to read, but just some highlights. He established and manages Lockton's communications consulting practice, providing communications expertise in all areas of corporate client corporations, total rewards, benefits, employee engagement, labor relations, strategic planning, marketing, and so on. And the interesting thing, he was the Director of Communications at Hostess Brands before, but before that, he had a successful career with the U.S. Coast Guard, a graduate of the Academy, and then did some interesting things, counter narcotics operations aboard Coast Guard ships. So he's got quite an interesting history and a good grasp of good communication strategies. Kimberly Roberts is Dr. Kimberly Roberts. She has earned her PhD. Congratulations. I didn't realize that, Kimberly. So I'm glad to know that. Kimberly is the Vice President and Wellbeing Practice Leader for Lockton Dunning Benefits. And she leads a team of experts supporting clients in all areas of career, community, financial, physical, and mental well-being. She has been in this role in other capacities. Many of you remember her or know her from Southwest Airlines, and before that, L3 Communications. So Kimberly is one of the most active, engaged people I know in the area of the employee culture, well-being, and population health topics. So we're always pleased when we have Kimberly come speak to our group. So with that, let me turn it over to you, Eric, and we encourage you to put questions in the chat box. This is being recorded. You'll get the slides afterwards, and be ready for an interactive discussion at the end of their presentation. Go ahead, Eric.
Perfect. Well, great. Well, thank you, Marianne. We're so excited to be here and eager to share these topics. Things are changing, and they're changing pretty quickly. From my perspective in communications, from Kimberly's work in well-being, we are seeing these changes where we have learned some things, and we are learning some things as we go, and we're really excited to share kind of where we are in that process, what we're discovering, and hopefully provide uh, some tips and practices and some ways of thinking about these changes, what's going on with engagement, and how to do it more effectively in this environment as we go. So we would like this to be interactive. We can go to the next slide. And so as we go through this and talk about these topics, which you've seen, we would love your input either via chat. I understand we've got this set up as a meeting, so you can unmute yourself and speak up. We don't mind the interruption if if you've got a question or a comment. And if you want to hop on video, that'd be great too. We'd love to see your faces. Maybe in your pajamas. I usually am during the workday, but no harm, no foul if you want to throw on the video. So we'd love to do that. So we're going to go through these topics kind of for format. We're going to ping pong back and forth. I'm going to cover this first bullet here to get us started, how to reassess engagement and communication methods. And I think that's a great place to start because we need to really take a step back and think about how we are approaching these topics in this changing environment. You know, things that you just sort of did naturally may not work anymore. And so we want to give you kind of a strategy and a strategic approach to reevaluating. And then from there, we'll kind of build on that and walk you through our view on the topic. But because this topic is on engagement, we'd like you to be engaged, as I mentioned. So if you could open up your chat and let us know if you do engagement surveys today, because typically when we talk about engagement, that's the first thing people think of. So you can answer with a yes or no. And then a second question is, are you able to include more than 2 questions specific to health and benefits and rewards? So you can answer yes, yes, no, no, yes, no. So those questions, do you do regular engagement surveys today? And if you do, are you able to include more than 2 questions specific to health and benefits? And typically the answers are no, no, or yes, no. But I know there are exceptions. So we'd love to see that. And as we go through this conversation today, we're not going to focus on broad engagement, right? The how your managers, how effective they are, and some of those things that you typically see. We want to really go a little bit deeper into engagement as it applies to benefits and total rewards. So we can go to the next slide. We'll do a quick introduction of ourselves. If you're not familiar with Lockton, we're a global company, approaching 9,000 employees worldwide, offices around the globe. And we're primarily known for our health and welfare consulting. We do property and casualty insurance and a number of things in those spaces. But what you may not know is that Kimberly and I and a number of other practices are local here in Dallas. We do work in a lot of consulting spaces. And so we're just really excited to share some of what we do and talk about with you today. All right, so let's get to our next slide and jump into our topics. The first thing I wanted to talk about was this first bullet that we shared in the agenda, which is how do you reassess engagement and communication methods in light of everything that's going on in the world today. And one thing I'd say is I don't think that the overall strategy for how you communicate and think about communication has changed. I think it's become much more urgent that you apply a strategic approach to your engagement, to your communication. People are in different places, they're working different ways. And so some of the things that we're displaying here on the screen, I think are even more important than they ever were. Now, I'm not gonna go through this whole cycle because I think that would take up too much time. So I'm gonna focus on a couple of key points here that I think are gonna be kind of recurring themes throughout our conversation today. And where we typically like to start, you know, this is a circle. So in the real world, we jump in wherever we are and we get work done. We need to start with understanding where we are today, and we need to think about what it is we need to do. And the best way to do that is through conducting research. Research can include a number of things. It can include looking at data, which Kimberly is an expert in, and understanding where there are gaps in performance and the way plans are set up and those sorts of things. But it's also talking to employees, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. I think that listening half of communication is underdone and critical to everything that we do, particularly now, in terms of understanding how we set objectives. So when you listen and you understand what the issues are, it becomes much easier to identify what the important opportunities for engagement and communication are. Where is their disengagement? Why is there disengagement? Where is there missing information? So we strongly believe in the research piece, which as I mentioned, I'll come back to. Once you understand what those issues and opportunities are, it gets much easier to set objectives. And clear objectives are really important in communication, particularly in the type of communication that we do, right? Employee communications. There are so many things we can talk about and want to talk about and are excited about that we can lose sight of moving the needle on the most critical topics. And so that's where it becomes really important to have this model, right? It's ongoing. It allows you to improve over time and focus time and resources, right? You have limited supplies of those things. So setting clear objectives is important. What we're going to focus a little bit more on today is defining audiences. So we're going to talk about things like diversity and what that looks like, how people are working. There are nuances to those items, but communicating very broadly, very general topics doesn't work. So you have to know your audience. You have to know what they need to hear, what their issues are, and then what's going to persuade them to take the steps that you want to. So defining audience is a really critical step that we want to emphasize and talk about a little bit today. From there, when you know your audience, now your messaging can be much more specific than it can, right? You can shift from an education model to a persuasion model. You can identify the right things to emphasize. Once you do that, the things that we typically start with, which are how should we communicate, what channels do we have, those fall into place in support of the messaging. And then you can get to this place where you're measuring your results. So sometimes that's the place to start, right? Measure results, understand what's working today, what's not working, and you can restart the cycle, right? And build on it over time. So that's the general model that we like to encourage our clients to apply to their thinking. And as we understand and do that, we learn so much, things that we never would have considered, things that those people that complain about what's going on aren't bringing up, real obstacles that real people have. And when you can solve those problems, boy, what a way to boost engagement, right? To solve problems for people and make things easier for them. So that's what we'll continue to talk through here as we go forward. So let's go to the next slide. So I'm gonna circle back to that listening component, right? As I said, I think research can encompass a lot more than just this listening piece. There's a whole data component that's really important. But there are a number of ways that you can listen before you communicate, before you push messages, to help you do everything we just talked about. And so Kembry and I do a lot of these projects together, these listening projects, which I think is really important because there is a communication aspect to it, but a lot more comes out of it than just how to communicate more effectively. Things that affect plan design, things that affect policies, right? There are a lot of learnings that come from employee research, from employee listening, that we're able to apply and provide recommendations based on. So a couple of these that I'll touch on. Focus groups, I think, are a really critical piece of what we do today. Even if we don't do quantitative research, so we've got various kinds of surveys and things on here, which are valuable. Just the act of getting out and listening actively face to face, hearing what people say, learning not just what their issues are, but why they're experiencing those issues, is incredibly valuable and something that we've learned about. We've learned about the importance of everything from taking away a Christmas turkey and the impact that had on engagement, surprising things like that, to really understanding situations where employees appreciate a benefit, but they're running into a small roadblock that's kind of souring the experience for them, right? And so that's not something that pops out on a survey, right? That you just see a number on how they rate it. But when you understand why there's a roadblock, you're able to solve it in very different ways. So we do focus groups and encourage you to do the same. Get out and listen. Executive interviews can be part of that process to understand sort of what managers and executives want to achieve and are doing as compares to what folks in the field, for example, think. There are a number of surveys that we can do to supplement that. So focus groups are a great tool to build a survey, get out there and hear some problems, hear some issues, and then use a survey to try to quantify how widespread that is, right? And understand how deep these problems run. You can design a much better survey when you've listened and hear some of the nuance of people's responses and discussions in focus groups. Um, we do conjoint services when you're ready to test some changes to see how people react. You can do that and apply some pretty cool tools on the back end to really force people to tell you how they weight and value different programs and benefits. And you can tie a lot of these things together in a much broader survey. The other things you can do, and then for the sake of listening and getting input, are things like open houses, right? You can take kind of that concept of a benefits fair, but you can really bring in some experts and some influencers and people and hear what people say and have discussions face to face. These can be virtual or in person, typically virtual now, but it's a great forum, kind of a low stress way to interact and just get broader input than you might hear just through day-to-day operations of your job. So we think that this is important. Starting with listening is critical. As we talk about workplace flexibility models and we talk about how to drive value through benefits and some of these things throughout the discussion today, um, I think understanding this listening piece, I think, is a foundational to everything that we do and that we talk about. So, Gary, I don't know if you want to add any color to some of the things that we've heard, but I'll turn it over to you now to talk about that workplace flexibility piece.
I think it's important as we consider where you're starting from and then where you want to go. So there's a few comments here in the chat that have mentioned, no, we haven't done an employee engagement survey. So you haven't had an opportunity to really get that employee feedback. And then as your workforce has potentially asked for more flexibility as a result of COVID and not returning back to the office, the convenience factor of getting quick employee feedback is a little bit more challenging because now you're reaching out one by one instead of in groups or in pockets and really being able to drive that message home. So with that in mind, what I'd like to ask for all of you as I address where you are today. Can you just post in the chat or, even come on if you feel like doing that? Are you 100% remote, hybrid, or in person for your organization? How does your staff fall out today so that we have an idea of how to balance some of the, feedback that we're going to continue to share today? Are you 100% remote, hybrid, or do you also still have in-person staff in facilities or just in office locations? So thanks for those that are posting that in there. So as we continue on, the challenge with workplace flexibility is that now everyone feels all connected at all times. There's relatively that much disconnect, although there's workplace flexibility and perhaps not having to start commuting at a certain time or clocking in an office location at a certain time. What has really been a detraction for many employees is now they're exposed to email, text, Yammer, Slack, Microsoft Teams, WebEx. Here we are today on Zoom. And so, as you're posting what your workforce looks like today, I would also love to know in the last 24 minutes, how many ways have you been connected to another network during our session today? So, no, nothing off the table. Has it been text? Have you taken a phone call in the 24 minutes you've been on Zoom? Have you checked an email? Have you answered a Microsoft Teams? Chat? We'd love to know how you're even maxed on your connectivity, because I think one thing that we want to continue to push you on is knowing that 45% of employees have been working remote or hybrid as of September of this year. Last year, that was around 30%. It went down a little bit at the beginning of this year, 20%. And then it's gone back up to 45% as more employees are saying, I want that workplace flexibility. I want the ability to work remote or at least work hybrid. And we're asking, why aren't these employees engaged? How are we losing engagement? And the biggest challenge that Eric and I have faced today is that Marianne has asked us to present an engagement presentation virtually. And we know how distracted you could become in this hour as we continue to push forward with engagement. So we've got text, phone, email, potentially going off during this message. And so what I would encourage you as you think about taking that employee engagement survey, maximizing some of the items that Eric has shared on listening and feedback, we've also got to consider the maximum capacity that an employee can handle on all the exciting things that you've been trying to roll out for benefits or rewards and recognition during the time when there's so many competing priorities. And I haven't mentioned yet that those of you who are potentially working remote, you might have a dog that barked, a kitty cat that jumped on your desk, kids that may have been calling you or stopping in your office. You may have an elderly parent that lives in your household. And so when we think about the dynamics of engagement, I do on the next slide want to start to walk you through the process that we're going to have to consider moving forward as we think about listening to our employees differently, balancing the new dynamic that they're facing. The first thing is just our own reality of where we are. What is the new culture that we're in? And the awareness of an individual's well-being. So a lot of the commentary that's come in the research over the last year and a half has not been a real focus on what does my medical, dental, and vision plan look like compared to another employer. It has been what is the employer that's focused on my mental well-being? What is the one that's focused on my work-life balance? And so we're continuing to see that be an evolving theme. And I think you'll find for those that are even doing employee engagement surveys, some of the top leading firms that are doing engagement for surveys are adding a well-being indices. So they're really wanting to evaluate how does one employer compare to the other on well-being, and how does that align with engagement? So I think you're going to find that ensuring that your impact on an individual's well-being is going to start to influence your culture and the dynamic of your workplace even more. So really understanding when an employee says, I'm trying to balance, work and life, what does that really mean? And then you move into that collaboration and visibility. So before Eric and I were sitting in a conference room at a round table having discussions about putting something together like this presentation. And because of the dynamics and flexibility of our workplace now, we do a lot of that virtually. And so the visibility, in addition to collaboration, has changed. So I'll just ask you as you continue to socialize today via the chat, how many of you have been recognized for your efforts, either as a leader or an individual contributor? And I'm not asking if you've recognized your people, but you've been recognized for the work that you've done in the last 12 months. Because I think when you have the water cooler talk or chat, it's easy for somebody to say you did a really nice job. But so often we're moving so quickly in this virtual environment that it's easy to forget just to give a quick acknowledgement, and much less not having like a weekly in-person meeting to really celebrate a success. We're getting so busy moving forward. So we've got a couple of recognitions. Oh, good. We definitely have quite a bit of movement there. The other is virtual work environment. So being mindful of the connectivity of the resources that you have in technology, but also the fatigue. So last year we spent a lot of time getting really creative with virtual happy hours, virtual baby showers, virtual birthday parties, to the point that Zoom became a tagline for Zoom fatigue, to Zoom's uncomfortableness. The Zoom was not happy that they were the brand that was associated with Zoom fatigue. But making that connection that engaging our workforce can be more thematic and doesn't have to be continually one streamlined channel and always in person. So there's many of you, and I'm just calling this out as we appreciate different levels of engagement. There are many of you that are highly engaged in the chat right now, but not many of you engaged from a visual standpoint for Eric and I to see. But I still feel like you're interested in the engagement opportunities and you really want to contribute to the conversation. So I think it's taking those same dynamics and applying them to your workforce in a way where that virtual work environment can connect to those that are still in person or those that are going to be hybrid and moving back and forth, that we're giving all an opportunity to engage and participate and not in one channel. So if we're making the opportunity available, you can get seamless networking. And so the technology can be powerful when used effectively. If the technology is not working in a way that is productive or meaningful to the employee, I think that's where we start to lose them. If it's just the sake of doing, for the sake of marking it off a checklist, I think we start running into engagement issues. And so what I'll give you, and Eric alluded to this in some of the benefits communication, is that there's been many virtual health fairs, virtual open house, virtual sharing of benefits information. And for some employees, they want to engage in those activities live because they're facilitated, they can ask questions, and it provides a great experience. For other employees, they just need a quick text message reminder about review the information, or perhaps they want to see some of the content, but they want to review that in a 15-minute snippet at a convenient time for them and not necessarily in an interactive participation mode. So I think those are things you can continue to consider. And then when it comes to work-life balance, I think you can really leverage the sentiment and the enjoyment that individuals have felt having worked from home more often, where they've been able to spend time with their family or they've been able to work out more because they haven't been commuting. Whatever seems to resonate with your population, I think you can start to use that to your advantage as you communicate benefits in the future. And Eric's going to speak a little bit more about this in a second on how you can take what you know about your population, the challenges they're facing, the opportunities that they're facing, and really create that opportunity to, assess value and really be prided in the value of those benefits. The other thing that I want you to really think about too, as you think about engagement, is distributed continuity. So as you look to remote workers, hybrid workers, in-person team members that you may have, they still want to receive the same level of information and be treated with equity across the board in the way that you're delivering information. And so what we found in this environment where remote and hybrid has become more common, team huddles are not the same across departments. They're not the same across business units. And so where we might have had some consistency with everyone in person in some capacity, or at least peer-to-peer sharing would make up for inconsistency, now everyone's on their own, trying to get that information one by one and not as effective in groups. So really continuing to push through continuity across the board will really be really helpful. And I think that help comes from employees continuing to find value in the way that you're delivering those resources today. So I think we can jump back to Eric, unless anybody has any questions or comments. We'll jump into how do you take this information and really make it applicable to getting that energy to continue around your benefits as you're fighting the great resignation today.
Any questions or comments? All right, we'll continue. Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Kemry. As we've done some of these focus groups in particular, I think what we've learned is that employees talk to each other and they're comparing. And so as some of this inconsistency across divisions and departments and things sort of creeps in, they talk and they understand that, and so it becomes much more difficult to manage. And so I think that reveals something from a communication strategy that we want to leverage as we attempt to drive value through benefits, through the rewards we offer, through the programs we offer. And it's not always obvious, but the key, I think, and we'll just say this up front, is the key to driving that perceived value for people to recognize, that they have a benefit, and to value it and value the relationship with your organization as a result of it, is for them to use it and have a good experience and talk about it. I mean, it's really that simple. Those peer-to-peer communications are vital. And I'm going to start on the negative side of the coin here, because I think there are a couple of big myths around how you drive value. I mean, we have conversations all the time with clients who say, we spend a ton of money. Our benchmarking is great. We've got wonderful benefits and rewards and programs that we offer, but people just don't appreciate it. And that may be true. But their instinct, and it makes sense, right? It's intuitive, is, well, we've got to market it better. Or we've got to educate our employees about their benefits more. And I'm using the term educate with a capital E here. That is not the approach that we have found is effective, right? Employees don't want to be benefits experts, right? They want to know what to do and when to do it. They want ease of experience, but they don't want to understand everything. And so that's an instinct that I think we need to be aware of and avoid. And as you have conversations, as you do focus groups and connect with employees and talk, you'll learn that that's the case. They're very worried about where they are in their place and what they need to do, how to save money, how to save time and convenience. And it's very easy for us, unless we're having those conversations, to lose that perspective, the what's in it for me, right, view. And that's what we need to communicate. It's also really easy to think, we've communicated this a lot, like people are sick of it, or we've communicated enough. If you need to communicate till you're sick of the topic, and then they might have heard what you're trying to communicate. Those messages just have to repeat it to a degree that I think people forget about. The other issue that we see is people consolidate too many communications to a single time of the year. Often that's enrollment, but maybe it's a couple of things. Maybe it is just a benefits fair. You've got to spread out these communications and communicate over time, consistently through a lot of channels, in a way that reflects what you're learning about individual use cases. Even when it comes to something as simple as healthcare, there are a number of different sub-audiences there. There are people who don't anticipate needing a lot of care, right? And they need to do all that preparation stuff. There are others that are interested in sort of preventing stuff. So they're willing to go that extra level and learn a little bit more, right? Contribute to HSAs, put themselves in a good position going forward. And then there's a third group that's actively using their healthcare benefits. They're dealing with complex claims. They're in a situation where their needs are incredibly different from those who, maybe get an annual physical. So understanding those nuances and really listening, I think, is really critical towards what you do. So I just want to say that up front, because I think that instinct to market, to tell people you have amazing benefits, is not effective. And it's not effective for a number of reasons, but among them, you're not selling Fords, right? You're not selling a product. You're telling something to people about products that they have access to, and you're encouraging them to use it. So it's a little bit more like a political campaign, the types of communications that we're doing around benefits, than it is marketing. Ford would kill for the market saturation that you have on day one. So let's take advantage of those things, and let's talk to employees with that perspective in mind. So touch on that. So the way that we do that, practically speaking, which is to say, get people to use their benefits, have a good experience, and then talk about them some more, is to really focus those objectives. It is so tempting to want to educate and talk about all the amazing things that we have, how to use them, a lot of the nuances and the IRS limits, and there is so much information we have available that when you expend all your energy and time communicating those things, you don't move the needle, you don't move things forward over time. So really focus your objectives and think about very specific things that you want to achieve through your communication in a specific amount of time, and drive it that way. Focus on those target audiences. Understand, and we're going to talk about diverse workforce here in a minute. Understand your diverse workforce. Understand people's needs and what they need to hear, and target your messages to them. And then, craft those appeals. There's a lot out there on what appeals work, what appeals motivate people. Everything, from scarcity and so on, that you can leverage in your messaging to help motivate people. Now that you understand where they're at and where they're trying to go, you can motivate them to take those right actions. Tell stories. I think I wish everybody could be part of these focus groups, right? Because they hear about how a benefit worked for someone or didn't. But testimonials, are a good way to do that. Talk about how an executive used a benefit, right? Tell stories in small bits and pieces. A testimonial is a story, right? And so that's a really easy way to share that. Encourage people to share their stories. And as we said, we're hoping that they're talking peer to peer. So making sure those experiences are good through your listening, I think, is really important. And that's what we've heard, as people do talk in our focus groups. We'll ask about a mental health program, and we'll get really interesting perspectives on how it worked or didn't, and conversations people have had with others who had a good or bad experience. And then just again, repeat those important things that you want people to know. So if we can go to the next slide. We'll continue. There are a lot of tips and tactics, and as I said, this is where a lot of people jump straight to, right? What are all the things that we can do? Do we need to send a postcard on this important topic, right? There's a deadline coming. We don't have text messaging. I wish we did. Those are great. Those are important. But you can see this list here on the right. There's probably thousands more of different tactics we can apply. When you're strategic, right? When you understand the knowledge and attitudes and behaviors you have and where you want them to be, you can drive that through the strategy we just outlined. The other thing that I'll leave you with, as you have conversations, as you think about your audiences, as you think about diversity and where people are and where they're working from, think about potentially the objectives that you want to drive through communication in 4 areas. I would suggest thinking about that utilization, which I touched on. They need to use those benefits and they need to have a good experience, and that perceived value will increase. But there are also changes that we're always making. We're adding new programs, spending time understanding that that's your objective, some type of change management objective, to help avoid the concern. People, in my experience, employees in particular, hear change and they think take away or cut. That's their default. So how do you encourage them to understand when there are adds and new benefits and how it benefits them? There are a lot of errors that people make that cost them money and time. They're not using programs effectively. So that can be an objective. That's a win. You want to talk about perceived value, just show them how they can use a program, a benefit more effectively to save time and money. Oh, absolutely. They love that. More conveniently working from home and those sorts of things. And then it can be confusing. So rather than trying to educate, kind of meet people at the point of a decision and help them decide how to act in a specific situation. And the good news is a lot of our technology and enrollment platforms and decision support tools are improving. But that's something we need to continue to press on, I think, as employers and leaders to help people communicate. So let's transition and talk a little bit more about the diversity piece. What your audiences look like, how you can understand them, and better address their needs in a really challenging time.
Thanks, Eric. So as we jump in here, I think part of assessing value has been reinforced from our conversation so far today is what drives the value really is where that perception comes from. And that could be at the individual level. It could be from a group of like-minded employees that are looking for the same thing from their employer. And so I'm going to loosely ask the question, are you addressing benefits for a diverse workforce? And if you could just post that in the chat, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what those things are specifically that you're calling out. But if this has been an initiative that you've taken on to address benefits for a diverse workforce and really been intentional about it, if you could just post yes in the chat or no in the chat, that would be terrific. So what we've seen more over the last 18 to 20 months now is really taking into consideration how COVID has impacted our workforce, how conversations around social injustice in 2020, how the election, there was a lot of things that drove a lot of conversation around really understanding individuals, their well-being, and the necessary steps that we needed to take as an employer to make a difference and really understand what was going to be meaningful. And then as resignation concerns or the great reshuffle, however you might be terming that among your HR team or benefits team, but it is being very well aware of what are employees looking for at different demographic levels and diversity needs. And so whether that's age, whether that's a formalized disability in ADA, or it's just a medical condition that we need to consider, gender has driven a lot of conversations over this past year, especially when it comes to working parents and what resources they may need to one, feel valued in the workforce, but feel supported. And workplace flexibility and policies for remote work didn't help all of our working parents, especially if they had toddlers. So they needed a little bit more support. They needed things like childcare, nanny services to come in site that were, COVID protected. So there was a lot of creativity and a lot of vendor adjustments that were made in the market. We are also seeing more of an appreciation to understand race and ethnicity and cultural influence when it comes to benefits that are valuable. So I would say even more of our clients have looked at functional medicine as a coverage level, even though it may not be in the carrier's, typical protocol and recommendations. We've also seen areas of understanding cultural competence in wellness programs and the way that nutrition programs are designed. Are they aligning with the culture of a particular ethnicity group that is meaningful for them to make a difference? And then when it comes to socioeconomic status, even some things as simple as tuition reimbursement. So we've had tuition reimbursement programs for many years across our organizations. And I think if you've been watching, plenty of the top Fortune 500 companies really explore, do I need to be funding tuition reimbursement or education assistance programs up front so that I can grow my workforce? Because maybe there's an affordability factor to invest in tuition up front and then be reimbursed later at the end of the semester. And so, as these things have come into play in the conversations, they're not only for an overall retention method, but they are addressing the well being of your population, the well being of your community, and where that can be impactful across the board. And so, Lena and Tonda, I'm just going to ask, since you both replied yes on the benefits for a diverse workforce, if there are a couple of items that you can share, you'd be willing to share with the group, I'd love for you to call that out in the chat as we keep going. So on the next slide, this is just an approach that Locked In takes with our clients to really understand what are the workforce needs of the population that we're serving. So we have built a cool tool at Locked In to be able to assess what does your population look like and where do they fall out in their wants and needs. And they're not always similar. Just because they're age 25 doesn't mean they're age 25 and all preparing to get married and having children. So there's different expectations that different groups have. They may be focused on their career, they may be focused on education programs. And so medical and dental and vision kind of fall on the back burner. And they want to know really what are you going to do to help them grow within your organization. And then we have individuals that will fall out in the tool when I'm really looking for childcare support. I'm really looking for an opportunity to still focus on retirement. So what's interesting with the number of generations that we have in the workforce, it's not just generations anymore that we're talking about solely. It's generation, it's lifestyle needs. It's also a combination of what does their work environment now look like, that they could have more workplace flexibility, and designing programs that are applicable. And to Eric's point, this helps us help align our clients with when do they need to communicate these resources. So oftentimes we are flooding our population with information in the benefits guide on all the cool tools that are available as a resource. And it's pretty interesting information when you're the benefits expert that needs that information on the fly. And I can appreciate that from having been in the role that many of you are serving today. And it's a quick booklet or it's a quick excerpt. But when I'm the employee that's specifically looking for educational benefits, I'm probably not going to my benefits guide because I'm thinking about that, like, oh yeah, that goes with medical, dental, and vision. I need to enroll. And so there's opportunities to take some of this information and when it would be a priority to employees and when are they going to be most likely to listen. And we've even engaged Yammer and Slack in some of these communications throughout the year with our clients, as opposed to ever putting the focus on the benefits guide or the focus on an internal intranet page. While it's there as a stagnant place to always hold the information, that's not where the enthusiasm was generated. And so you can, in this environment, take some old programs off the shelf and just recommunicate them and deliver them in a different way. And you will be the best benefits HR leader ever known because some of the information was so hidden, it didn't get the traction that you were looking for. And I think in this environment, it'll help you with some of the retention challenges or even recruitment challenges that you may be having in reinvigorating some of the benefits that you already have in place today. And on the next slide, I think we just want to give you some examples of where we're seeing a lot of focus on just explaining diverse workforce. So, what does that mean exactly? How can I be supportive to a diverse workforce? But in the family support category is where we've seen considerable strides. And that was already happening before COVID. But I do think that the pandemic really sealed the deal on anything that was needed around family support. And vendors have gotten really creative and expansive in this area. And having an opportunity to reframe that message for your working parents, I think is a great opportunity there. There's some items there listed under socioeconomic, and this is taking maybe programs that you already had in place and redesigning how does it impact your lower paid portion of your workforce. So maybe those benefits got a lot of attention for those that are in an economic status where weren't living, necessarily paycheck to paycheck, or they weren't dependent on the employer to support them in these areas, but it was a nice to have. These are areas where this is a real opportunity to continue to focus on your employees and create value. And then there's much more of an emphasis around cultural relevance, as we hit on a little bit a few minutes ago. And I know that many of you have probably focused on multilingual benefits communications, like adding Spanish language. But I think taking that to a new level where it's not just about like pictures or like linguistics, but it's also about the competence of your vendors that are in place today to ensure their teams are doing diversity training when they're talking to an individual that has different cultural influences about how they take care of some of the resources. Maybe it's how they take care of their family, how they take care of their health, that's really included and understood in the delivery method. And it creates that ongoing value that what you're providing and what you're providing through your vendors is meaningful today. What's been commented over here in the chat is addition of parental leave. So that's definitely something that we've called out here. And then there's also the element of adding business resource groups. So some are calling those employee resource groups or business resource groups to really help with addressing diversity in the workforce. So thanks for those that have shared that in the chat as well. I think from here, and I know we're running close to time, is we did want an opportunity for those who would love to share a quick roundtable. So we'll take the next 3 minutes. We don't want to put you on the spot and make you share all your wisdom from your current organization. But if we could touch on the next slide, we just like to ponder a few questions with you on knowing, how you can take the next steps to engagement winning for your organization. And so we'd like to ask anybody that would come off of mute and share, how do you listen to your employees and what has that experience been today? How do you listen to your employees?
And it's okay if it's just simply they come and they knock on my door, they call me and complain.
Oh,
Any comments there?
That's something just simple. So we're in corporate headquarters and we've got HR teams spread throughout the divisions. And so it's those people that are out seeing the actual work happen that get more of those comments. And one very interesting thing that just came up, we have a discount program, Perk Spot. I know everybody's got something like that, and it offers discounts on pet insurance. And so one of our recruiters said, can we look into this? Can we get pet insurance? And it makes me think, Kimberly, of what you said. You're a rock star just by recommunicating something you always have. So that vendor already has the benefit. We just need to put it more prevalent and, like you said, political. Like, explain to people this is a super thing and we didn't know you'd like it so much. So it's just that a different group. So it's probably the younger folks, younger generations, more focused on pets, and who knew how critical that was. So we'll make sure that our next material promotes that as big as something like tuition reimbursement, even though it doesn't cost us anything, but it's important.
Uh, Absolutely. And I think what we've seen in the research, and we've even validated this with some of our own employees at Lockton, just to speak on the pet example, is that many times we'll put females at a certain generation and a certain age in childbearing years and send them communications that would lead them down the pathway. And sometimes that does help the majority of those that might be interested in, having assistance with maternity or fertility programs and information. But they may also be on a pathway where they have decided not to have children. It's not that they can, it's just not their pathway, but their pet is their child. And so we've even done communications around individuals with their child representative as a member of their family. And so being able to communicate that pet insurance and getting that attention. And then to your point, Tonda, we already have it, we can celebrate it. And it creates so much more value in just knowing that you've, been able to provide that. We will ask one more question of the group, given the time that we have. And that is, what unique challenges are you facing today that you haven't been able to solve for yet in engagement? And maybe between Eric and I, we can give you a couple of tips or suggestions as we close out today.
Technology, connectivity, yeah. So I think that's definitely a challenge, and that varies from what I've seen by workforce. Certainly, there are certain workforces that are overly connected. Kimberly alluded to that, where they're just like, I can't take it from 10 directions at once, 5 different platforms. But then you have others, as we move to this very technologically advanced world, that are still very difficult to reach that way. And so what we've seen can work pretty effectively is a sort of traditional communication bridge to technology. So a simple example is sending postcards or posters with a keyword or a QR code that connect people to text messaging, or they connect them to a mobile app. So you can take those traditional communications, put them in the home, put them in the workplace, and bridge people pretty easily to that. One quick example is, we talk about communicating throughout the year. Life events, right, are kind of a big deal for everybody of some form or another. But people don't memorize every step they do for every event, so they need it when they need it and no other time. And so we've had clients who will basically build a keyword for when you need it. You text the keyword and you get a logic tree of responses that guides you either to easy information, quick summary sheets, or if you need more, the right person to call. And the beauty of that is now, instead of communicating all those details in guide form or whatever else, we're communicating a keyword. You can send that keyword out reminder 50 different ways. You can put it on postcards, you can send emails, and just say, hey, need assistance, had a life event, text this keyword. And so you can really simplify the messaging. So one quick example of the way that we've addressed that connectivity issue for some clients.
We have yet to figure out though how to text laundry and have the laundry done.
Oh,
That is
yeah.
one we're still working on.
So,
But if we just wrap up today, we are so thankful to having the opportunity to have such high engagement in the chat thread today. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Mary Ann, Danita, or Diana to get more information from us. You can email us. But we're happy to support you on your journey to continue to rethink engagement strategies. And we know that the Great Reshuffle is causing a lot of attention to just make sure that benefits are valued and appreciated. So Mary Ann, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much. Wow, this was really terrific. Thank you, Eric and Kimber, for just a sensational presentation and very, very helpful discussion. Wow. So I took copious notes, even though you're making the slides and the recording is available. So this has been extremely helpful, and I really appreciate the attention of all of you, our corporate members who tuned in today. This is your responses in the chat box were great, right on. Thank you for sharing that and for being part of this discussion. I'll leave with two final comments that I'm repeating from those in case you didn't tune in at the very beginning. Number one is please, please, please register yourself and your team members, as many as you can, for our December 2nd annual forum. It's really, really important to us that you show up for that. And you won't be sorry if you do, because it's going to have a lot more value taken away from it than, but we'll just enjoy your presence in person. The second final comment is those of you who have not renewed your membership in time to take advantage of the 25% discount, which ended yesterday, because you spent the time with us today, which we so appreciate, and as a show of appreciation, we are extending it to the end of the week. Please email or call us at membership@dfwbgh or to me directly, faison@dfwbgh.org, and we'll make sure that you get take advantage of that 25% discount for your renewal. So great. So thank you again for being part of our corporate benefits forum today. Bye now. Have a good rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.